All right, an upsurge in big earthquakes. And there is the earthquake of all earthquakes to come in the near future, probably in, about 12 or 14 years from now. So the biggest earthquake happens when the Lord sets his feet. He comes down, the second coming of Christ, when he sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives, and it splits right in half. And that is the biggest earthquake that will ever happen when Jesus sets his feet down there. I want to take a look at this article and then take a look at the top 10 or 15 earthquakes in the history of the Bible. And this is interesting because this is prophetic. This also relates to creation because it's related to the Earth's rotation slowing, which is entropy. That means everything is winding down. God wound the universe up. It was going fast, and now it's going slower. The Earth is rotating slower. Before it was rotating fast. The days were shorter. Now the days are longer. It's rotating slower. That's entropy. That is from order to chaos. The theory of evolution suggests that stuff has to go from chaos to order. That would mean from slow to fast, from bad to good. All we see empirically, observe with our eyes, can repeat in the lab. All that we can do scientifically is see stuff going from good to bad, from order to chaos, fast to slow, close to far, if you will, in terms of the Earth and the Moon. And I've spoken about those things before. But this is interesting. Upsurge in big earthquakes predicted for 2018. And what does the Bible say about earthquakes? Well, it speaks about birth pains and the earth groaning, related to the end time things that are occurring around the earth. So we expect massive earthquakes. And scientists are now coming out and saying, you know what, we are predicting earthquakes as well. Well, wait a minute, the Bible predicted earthquakes first of all. Scientists have warned there could be a big increase in numbers of devastating earthquakes around the world next year, 2018. They believe variations in the speed of the Earth's rotation could trigger intense seismic activity. And these will be the birth pains, the groaning. And what happens with birth pains? Well, they grow in frequency and intensity. And we saw massive earthquakes this year. Scientists are now saying we're going to see even more earthquakes and larger ones next year. What is that? That is the increase in frequency and intensity. This is birth pains that the Bible spoke about. They believe the variations in Earth's rotation could trigger intense seismic activity. Although such fluctuations in rotation are small, changing the length of a day by a millisecond, they could still be implicated in the release of vast amounts of underground energy, it is argued. The link between Earth's rotation and seismic activity was highlighted last month in a paper by Roger Billum of the University of Colorado in Boulder and Rebecca Bendick of the University of Montana in Missoula, presented at the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America. The correlation between Earth's rotation and the earthquake activity is strong and suggests there is going to be an increase in the number of intense earthquakes next year. Now, I kind of wish they didn't say this, because then when they do start happening, they're not going to say that the Bible was correct, even though the Bible has been saying this for over 2,000 years. What they'll come out and say, science got it right. Science got it right. The Bible was never right. The Bible just guessed at it, of course. That's what they'll say. But I think it's fascinating. It proves that the Bible was accurate. It proves the Bible was accurate more than 2,000 years ago, when the words of the various books of the Bible were inspired and written by men inspired by God. In their study, Billum and Bendick looked at earthquakes of magnitude 7 and greater that had occurred since 1900. Major earthquakes have been well recorded for more than a century, and that gives us a good record to study. Now, I will put the link in the description. You can check this one out, but this is very biblically significant, and a few people have done videos already. I want to take a look at the greatest earthquakes that have occurred in the Bible. This is from Institute for Creation Research.org, ICR.org. You can go to this website. They have a ton of excellent creation evolution information supporting the biblical 6,000-year history of man and proving it with empirical science. Empirical science is what evolution does not use. Evolution cannot be confirmed by empirical science. What is empirical science? Empirical science is stuff you can observe and repeat in the lab. It is stuff you can do. We can test it. We can observe it with our own eyes. We can repeat it real time right now in the lab. That is called empirical science. Creation you can confirm with empirical science. Evolution you cannot confirm with empirical science. For example, carbon dating beyond, say, 10,000 years, we simply can't observe more than a couple of thousand years of recorded history. We don't have actual record of it. And so evolution is not empirically observable or repeatable. Creation, what we see, animals creating after their kind or reproducing after their kind, that is what we see. That is empirical evidence that a cow was never a fish. Because what we see happening now is a cow has baby cows, and dogs have baby dogs. But dogs don't have baby fish, and fish don't have baby dogs, etc. So we can't empirically confirm evolution in the lab, but what we can do in the lab is confirm that animals produce after their kinds, which is exactly what the Bible said. So looking at this, the Holy Land is a region where earthquakes occur frequently. By one means or another, big earthquakes have been documented in the Holy Land for a period of exceeding 4,000 years. Many are known from history and literature, especially the Bible. Holy Land earthquakes are also evidenced from archaeological excavations. No other region of the earth has such a long and well-documented chronology of big earthquakes. So there's lots of written, verbal, and other historical evidence for earthquakes. So consider the 17 most important earthquakes that relate to the Bible. The earthquakes are listed in chronological order. We begin with creation and go through the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that will be the biggest earthquake, I think, that will cap off the history of the world as we know it. So day 1, day 3 of creation week. On the third day of creation week, the waters of the earth were collected into the oceanic basins and the continents appeared. Continents seem to have been uplifted from the ocean floor, which was depressed during a great faulting process that established the foundations of the earth. So that is the first big upheaval and earthquake. Noah's flood, as the fountains of the deep blasted out of the crust of the earth, there was great tectonic shift adjustment. Here, the fountains of the deep, all of which were broken up on a single day. So this was in the chronological order. That was the second massive notable earthquake on the earth. Destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. A disaster called an overthrow was believed in about 2050 BC on the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. The event was so spectacular, swift, and complete that it became proverbial for the severity of judgment that God's righteous anger could deliver. So that is another big earthquake. Moses on Sinai, number 4. Before God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai and gave the Ten Commandments, a great shaking of the mountain occurred. Korah's rebellion in the wilderness. A crisis of leadership developed among the children of Israel in the wilderness. Korah and all his men were killed and their possessions taken as the land on which they were camped split apart and closed back upon them. Number 6, the fall of Jericho. That's where Joseph and his army marched around the encampment 7 times and the walls came tumbling down. Number 7, Philistine camp near Geba. I'm not going to go through these. I'll put this link as well in the description. Elijah on Mount Horeb. There was an earthquake there. Amos's earthquake of 750 BC. This is all detailed. History bears this out. Number 10, Qumran earthquake in 31 BC. All these are parts of the history of the Bible. Number 11, the crucifixion in Jerusalem. So this was a great earthquake that occurred when Jesus died. And he said, "It is finished." As he died on the cross, immediately the curtain of the sanctuary of the temple was torn, and a great earthquake occurred. Rocks were broken, and many dead saints were resurrected from their tombs. That's what Matthew 27 says. That was the first resurrection. The earthquake upon the death of Christ called attention to the great salvation that has been accomplished that day on the cross. Number 12, the resurrection in Jerusalem, April 5th, 33 AD. Number 13, Jerusalem prayer meeting. Following the day of Pentecost, the assembled church in Jerusalem received reports of threats of persecution from the Jewish leaders. And so there was an earthquake there. The prison in Philippi, this is where Paul and Silas were held, and the earthquake happened, and they were effectively free. They were let loose. The earthquake draws our attention to how God was using his apostles to minister in early days of the church. Number 15, it goes to today's earthquakes. And speaking of birth pains, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Seismograph analysis reveals that the frequency and energy of large earthquakes was not constant throughout the 20th century. According to popular urban legend, big earthquakes have been increasing in both frequency and energy. Legend is not supported by seismograph data. There appears to be about a 30-year cycle of increasing and decreasing earthquake frequencies, suggesting the beginnings of the birth pains theme. Number 16, Gog's future earthquake in Israel. So in Ezekiel 38 speaks of an earthquake, and there will be a massive disaster. Number 17, Messiah's earthquake in the future. So the Apostle John wrote of the great earthquake in the future associated with the opening of the seventh seal. This earthquake will be the precursor to the greatest earthquake since men have been on the earth. The greatest earthquake will occur in association with the seventh bowl at a place called Armageddon. The future Armageddon earthquake, or Messiah's earthquake, will be associated with the return of Christ to Jerusalem, as described as inflicting severe topographic and geologic changes on a global scale. Scripture appears to look forward to the monumental changes associated with the future earthquake after God's voice shakes the earth mightily and fully accomplishes this extraordinary geologic change. The saints will receive a kingdom which could not be moved. So these are the big earthquakes in our history and in our future that are coming. The Bible speaks many times of earthquakes, and we can also see, I think, the correlation there of the birth pains occurring, starting. This is the start of it. I think we only have a couple of years left. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know this. So I'll leave it there. That's a lot of information to digest. I'll put the links in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and look up for your redemption draws nigh. I hope you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, because he is coming soon.